Hey guys, Omni here. Welcome back. We got our final breakdown from New Rockstars for the finale of Ahsoka. There was a lot going on in there, and clearly there was more to be set up with the way things were left, especially for Ray Stevenson's character Baylan. I hope that's something we follow up on. I do really hope that's something we continue to explore, because that was one of the things I was the most interested about and was kind of hoping that the finale would focus on, but because we know we have more Thrawn stuff coming. So maybe that was like kind of a meta awareness that I had because of Rey's passing, that's what I was kind of hoping while we had him, we could explore that side of the connections. But unfortunately, there's no way they could have predicted that, and it played out the way it did, and rest in peace. He gave a phenomenal performance. It's nice and warming to see that most of all of the Star Wars community that I've seen so far has at least been very loving towards his portrayal here and his character and the imprint impression that he left in the series. So I hope we get to see the conclusion to that arc in some form. But we got a lot of stuff to dive into in this episode regardless, so let's go ahead and strap in. Remember, if you're not subscribed to New Rockstars, go do that. I'll have a link to their video in the description, but let's go ahead and dive in. Here we go.
Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Eric Voss, and this is a breakdown of Star Wars Ahsoka Episode 8, the finale, The Jedi, the Witch, and the Warlord, a title that totally seems inspired by C.S. Lewis's The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And I'm choosing
one would think
Skoll is our Aslan, because Ray Stevenson was my hero this season, and he's right where he should be, on the hand of the Father. From
dude, that's wild.
Mortis, Clone Wars, Night Sister callbacks, and other great Star Wars Easter eggs, let's break down this episode scene by scene for the details you missed. And you know what? A huge thanks to all of you for joining us this season of Ahsoka. It has really been my honor to share my Tuesdays and Wednesdays with you all. And if anything in these videos has inspired you to watch stories a little bit more deeply, or just has made you feel seen as a nerd who looks too far into things, me staying up until 2:39 a.m. writing these analysis has been well worth the effort. So thanks again, and let's dive
What time is it?
Okay, we open with Kevin Kiner's ceremonial drum beat. Yeah, kudos to the work Kiner has been doing all this season. These drums,
for real, man,
bass and organ pair perfectly with this opening shot of Thrawn's chimera placed on the Peridia Fortress, as the Gothic church organ of Thrawn's Majesty pairs with the grassroots dark magic of the Night Sisters. Really, this opening shot is just perfectly bisected by a center dividing line formed by the fortress and the fold of the chimera, its underbelly patterned as it was in Rebels. Thrawn orders Enoch to dispatch 2 TIE fighters to the Jedi location, wanting to cover his bases.
I've watched many an Imperial officer make the same assumptions about the rebellion.
Yeah, he's suddenly referring to officers like Governor Price from Rebels, who made a number of mistakes, underestimating a small number of Jedi, including when she bombed a fuel depot that killed Kanan Jarrus, but allowed Ezra and Sabine and Hera to escape. But Thrawn also admits,
even I fell victim to the heroics of a single Jedi.
That he
Never
did.
Again.
He's likely referring to Ezra Bridger, whom Thrawn allowed to board the Chimera in the Rebels' final episodes just to face defeat when Ezra summoned the Purgle. But I also like to think Thrawn might be referring to his time with Anakin Skywalker, documented in Timothy Zahn's 2018 Thrawn Alliance, a really great read that's a dual timeline story about Thrawn partnering with Darth Vader on a mission to Batuu during the Galactic Civil War. And yes, Batuu, that is a location in Disney's Galaxy's Edge. But this story also flashes back to a Clone Wars era mission between Thrawn and Anakin Skywalker. So yeah, this is around when Thrawn begins to surmise that certain qualities about Vader totally remind him of that strapping young Jedi he went on that mission with. And it is why I think when he learned that Ahsoka Tano's master was Anakin, he went, oh. I just like the idea that Thrawn left that forever haunted, that despite his brilliant military mind, he remains befuddled by Jedi and their weird culty ways. Speaking of weird culty ways, the 3 great mothers thank Morgan Elsbeth.
She who heard our dreams across the stars. Come forward.
Interesting that they say our dreams, as in they actually subconsciously call to Morgan while they were sleeping. I have a theory about that I'll get to later. They tell Morgan,
you shall be rewarded.
I'm curious what he thinks.
The gift of shadows.
Yeah, you hear that?
Yeah, I love that delayed echo.
Of shadows, sounding like the voice of Night Sister spirits already being invoked for this ritual. They chant.
Do you pledge yourself to the sisterhood, to the magics, to the old ways?
I love the way she says the old ways.
Life for this new one.
Your loyalty? Your life?
Yes, this is the same exact Night Sister baptismal creed that Mother Talzin spoke to Asajj Ventress in Clone Wars Season 4, Episode 19, Massacre.
Do you pledge yourself to the sisterhood, to the magics, and the old ways? Do you abandon your old life for these?
Oh wow, it is. I didn't even catch that word for word.
Asajj Ventress was the Dathomirian female Force user mentioned by Anakin's recording last episode. She's actually the one who gave him that scar. This Night Sister baptism happens in the episode when Dooku and Grievous come to Dathomir to wipe out most of the Night Sister Coven. And the part of the creed, do you abandon your old life for this new one, is spoken by Aktrapa, who is based on the Greek fate who cuts the thread of life. So she's asking Morgan, and God, can we just acknowledge that her name is Morgan? It sounds like a name some drunk girl yells across a party. Morgan, I thought you were gonna day. Anyway, I'm sorry about that. Aktrapa is—
Hey, Morgan Le Fay predates all of that for the most part.
Asking Morgan to end her old life so a new one can begin. And then your loyalty to your life is spoken by Lachesis, the fate who measures the thread, as Morgan's loyalty to the Night Sisters is something expected to run the duration of her life, which unfortunately we'll see this episode ain't that long. Whereas Mother Johnson levitated Asajj's body with green Night Sister sorcery and it looked awesome, they ain't got the budget for wire work here, so they just kind of burn Morgan's face like Harry Potter on Professor Quirrell's face, scald in some green fire to make Morgan's facial markings more pronounced, similar to theirs. But really the coolest thing about this is the sound design. When Clotho first steps up to Morgan, we hear voices and whispers of past Night Sisters working their way into Clotho's hands.
Yep.
And then as Clotho forces the fire into her face, we actually hear these guttural moans. Maybe it's because I just watched 1980s Ghost, but this reminds me of the sounds of the shadow demons that drag evil souls to hell, which they actually created by pitching down and stretching out the sounds of babies crying.
Oh wow, I didn't know that. Oh my god.
They conjure this sword.
The Blade of Talzin.
The Blade of Talzin
raises a lot of questions.
When she dueled Mace Windu
well,
in Clone Wars Season 6, Episode 9, The Disappeared, Part 2. Talzin conducts a ritual.
It's definitely got a very different hilt, but it also begs the question of, that blade's here. Can it be summoned across distances? Is this just a retcon of that appearance? Is it a name that has meaning longer than Talzin herself held it? Was she named after some legendary figure? Was she named after the sword? Was that a kind of manifestation in the present day on Dathomir of that original sword? Or was it the original sword? Which predates what? What's named after what? It just begs a lot of questions. Or are they all one and the same? Can it manifest differently by two different people, depending on how it's summoned? I was very curious about that a bit.
On the moon's Ardosa sticks to extract the living force from Queen Julia. Talzin was hoping to become more powerful than any Jedi or Sith. Jar Jar helps in this episode, but Talzin ends up dissipating into some green mist, and she would actually later go on to die while trying to save her son Maul from capture in the Son of Dathomir comic. But this hilt of the Blade of Talzin has a pale white color and a black pommel, which do match the color tones of Talzin's face and the other Great Mother faces. Perhaps her entire spiritual essence lives on inside this weapon. But why do they reward Morgan with the sword? Perhaps these fates foresee Morgan having to die a warrior's death and sacrifice herself so that the rest of them can escape. This blessing is a curse in disguise. That might be why it's called the Gift of Shadows. And isn't it interesting that between Morgan and Sabine and Ahsoka, the rescuers of the people who are stranded on this planet are the ones who have to trade places with them?
Oh, that's a good point.
Star Wars klaxon alarm.
Well, I mean, obviously, we traded place with Sabine and Ahsoka. I didn't even think about that aspect for Morgan. Was that no, her entire purpose was to come here and ensure that Thrawn left, and with no guarantee or even intent for her to return with him. And she was fine with that because of what she, I guess, achieved. There's a trading of places for all involved, from all seekers in this story.
Blaring. and 2 TIE fighters flank Thrawn as they depart. Yeah, I am ready to see this guy as a villain of a Star Wars movie. So the title of this episode, The Jedi, the Witch, and the Warlord, must absolutely be a nod to C.S. Lewis's The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Like, there's no way it's not.
The Warlord, probably referring to Thrawn, the Witch, probably Morgan, and the Jedi would be, well, it could be a few people.
A lot of people.
Ahsoka, Sabine, Ezra, Anakin. Remember, Jedi is also plural, so it could be all of them. Dave Filoni did say that when he first conceived of the world between worlds, he got that name from the wood between the worlds in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Oh yeah, good point. Forgot about that.
It's not gonna work. Look.
Not going to work? What are you talking about?
The blade emitter's too narrow.
I saw somebody say, and I swear I just cut him off. He's probably about to say it. And I kind of thought it too in the moment. I just didn't have time to really think more on it until I was going through the edit. But the jokes about rebels and their blades being so thin.
Arrow. This seems like a meta response to the Rebels viewers who complain that the lightsabers on the series were too narrow. This would technically be the 3rd lightsaber Ezra constructed for himself after his original one with the blue blade and then the new one with the green blade in later seasons of Rebels that Sabine now carries. But where would Ezra have gotten the kyber crystal for this blade? Huyang must keep a drawer of kyber crystals handy? I just think it's a bit odd because Huyang, of anybody, would know that the Jedi pairing with their kyber crystals is a sacred process that determines how well the lightsaber channels their connection to the Force.
See, I saw a lot of people bring up that very same point, and you know, I just assumed, yeah, he probably over time as Ahsoka and him, much like she got her own new crystals and stuff like that over time, you know, the ones she found and she took and purified, you know, I'm sure that along the way during their travels, they would probably pick up any stray crystals that they came across of whoever, Inquisitors or whatever, who they struck down, whatever they found along the way. They can't necessarily just go seek them out the traditional format, you know, after everything the world has gone through at this point. So I would just assume, of all people, Huyang would also have crystals of his own, maybe from repurposed sabers they've collected, because we've seen they got plenty, they have different stuff tucked away as well on the ship. Also, this ship is way older than all of the life forms that exist on it. So like, if this is his workshop, man, I would have to imagine he's got crystals. Like, it's just, it is what it is, man. You got to roll post Empire world. You kind of got to roll with what you got.
But you know, whatever. Sabine and Ezra tell Huyang that Kanan Jarrus taught Ezra how to build a lightsaber, and Huyang remembers Kanan.
I told you, I taught almost every youngling at the Jedi Temple, including your master. Clever boy Caleb was, very curious. A little shy, perhaps.
Yes, he calls him Caleb, as before he used the alias of Kanan Jarrus during the Rebellion era, he went by Caleb Doom. Huyang also says of Caleb's shyness,
who could blame him? Those were troubling times.
Yeah, this is great because it acknowledges how weird it must have been to be a youngling during the Clone Wars, which I really appreciated this season of Ahsoka and exploring how messed up it is that the Jedi deployed child soldiers. And remember, the season premiere of Bad Batch shows the heartbreaking moment Caleb Doom lost his master Depa Billaba, and how the member of the Bad Batch, Hunter, allowed Caleb to escape after Caleb did an insane Morpheus-style force leap across a waterfall that Ezra nearly recreates this episode. Huyang presents Ezra with a specific blade emitter with this disc around it, matching the one that Kanan Jarrus, aka Caleb, had at the end of his hilt. Huyang says,
I had 2 of those. Kanan took the one, the other I held onto in case he ever needed it.
Now Ezra's blade is blue once again, like his very first saber, bringing him full circle with the very first kyber crystal that he got during his moment with Yoda in the Lothal Jedi Temple that was technically the world between worlds early on in Rebels. Huyang reveals that Ahsoka became concerned that Sabine was training to be a Jedi for the wrong reasons.
At the end of the war, the Empire purged the entire surface of the planet, killing hundreds of thousands.
Her family?
We're all lost, sadly.
Yes, he's referring to the Night of a Thousand Tears, first mentioned in the Mandalorian Season 1 finale, and then shown in the Book of Boba Fett Chapter 5 when Moff Gideon's forces dropped fusion bombs on the planet. And we learn that this happened at the end of the Galactic Civil War, so sometime around the Battle of Endor, maybe before the final battle of that war, the Battle of Jakku, that Moff Gideon pulled a real shitty late sucker punch on Mandalore. And Ezra asks about Sabine's family because, he spent a lot of time with the Wren family in the first couple episodes of of Rebel Season 4. He knew them. Huyang says that Ahsoka feared that Sabine would reach her full potential and become dangerous, which sounds like Ahsoka recognizes how Anakin losing his mother Shmi is really what started his path to the dark side. So it wasn't really Sabine's failure, it was Ahsoka's fear that caused that student-teacher relationship to fall apart.
Well, that's the whole point of episode 5. It's the whole thing that Ahsoka's been struggling with from her reintroduction in the present timeline in The Mandalorian to now. That weight, that uncertainty with these choices and these paths, and whether or not she's, in a position to help guide people accurately, given where her training came from itself. It's everything that needed to be reconciled, which Anakin stepped in to help complete that training and help move her forward beyond that hump, beyond his failures, to learn from that, adapt from that, and own the things that he taught her that are valuable and they do stick. He's not, we've talked about this at length. You guys, I think you get it by this point, but that shows the fears of Ahsoka before her ascension to Ahsoka the White.
Sabine and Ahsoka, though, finally discuss Sabine's decision to give Baylan the map sphere, and Sabine says,
Sorry. No.
Yes, we know from Han and Leia and Empire. I know, it's Star Wars for I love you. Ahsoka says,
Over the years, I've made my share of difficult choices. Often no one understood my reasons, except my master. He always stood by me.
Yes, we're reminded of the time when Ahsoka left the Jedi Order at the end of Clone Wars Season 5.
I believed in you. I stood by you.
I know you believe in me, Anakin, and I'm grateful for that.
I understand wanting to walk away from the Order.
I know.
A line that many over the years interpreted as Ahsoka possibly hinting that she knew about Anakin and Padme. But also, I know, it's Star Wars for I love you.
Also, she's got to at least know that based on being raised alongside him and the way he approaches and tackles certain elements, that he doesn't necessarily agree with or necessarily jive with the way that the Jedi do things. He's always about bending the rules, bending the code, whether or not it's about him and Padme or not. It's just kind of his entire relationship with the Jedi Order. He's always been in a dissonant position with it. And they knew each other, I think, better than most people, the three, because Obi-Wan also knew. He picked up on the Padme thing long before it came out, but he also kept that under wraps, to protect Anakin. They all know each other so well that they just kind of understand. And I think even Obi-Wan would understand if he went the way he did. If maybe he chose a similar path to Ahsoka, I think everybody would kind of get it. But, he's kind of held up in a very different position.
Ahsoka asks,
Have you kept up with your training?
I try. I do.
Yes, of course, a nod to Yoda's famous do or do not, there is no try. Inside Thrawn's TIE fighters, we hear the Sinar targeting system.
I didn't catch that.
From the original trilogy. Now, while these TIEs are aiming for the T6, from the wide overhead shot, you can see that they first hit the no-T trailers beneath it. So much for the T6 hovering over them as cover. Sabine runs into the cockpit of the T6, and seemingly for no reason, she shoulder checks Huyang. Now, it's probably Natasha Bordizzo being told that they would do a camera shake in response to that blast raining sparks through the cockpit, but the special effect, I guess, comes too late, or maybe the shoulder check comes too early, but either way, I like
That's an interesting detail.
We're talking all that shit about her Jedi skills all season. I mean, look at Huyang's face.
That would be funny.
He totally clocks it. Ezra and Ahsoka use the Force to prop up the T6 as Sabine rigs up a little boost from the engine, and it kind of looks like Ahsoka gives it an extra force push to slingshot it.
Throwing it like a paper airplane.
Give Ezra later. Now, I cannot explain why this TIE fighter pilot screams and covers his head instead of, quickly veering the TIE fighter out of the way, or why the T6's wings aren't totally obliterated when totally obliterating the TIE fighters. But, the T6 is temporarily out of commission, and actually it makes the same engine shutdown sound effect from the Lucasfilm.
I mean, it's also made it's clearly thicker and sturdier than the flimsy little TIE fighters, man. Their entire hold up together is just a little one little focal point that just disrupts the entire shell. I don't know. whatever.
It's interesting that Thrawn says to consider all the TIE fighters lost and to mark the captain for a citation. This gives us a sense of the discipline with which Thrawn commands his forces, but
He's like, yeah, they did what they were going to do. Kind of expected it. Right up the commanding officer. Slap him on the wrist. Wow.
And interestingly, Morgan gives some parting words to the Night Trooper volunteers.
The blessing of the Great Mothers shall protect you in battle against the Jedi.
Yeah, this blessing we see
Yeah,
later is
about
actually gonna
that.
be a resurrection curse, and Thrawn confirms.
Those are the volunteers. They were made aware.
Yeah, think about it. Thrawn could have just ordered troopers to go into battle, but these ones were offered the option to partake in this experiment to keep the Jedi on the planet for as long as possible, and with them death and zombie resurrection. Perhaps part of the Night Sister spell is that those who get reanimated have to first consent to it happening prior to their deaths. Ezra says,
Thrawn found this place. He woke up the witches, rebuilt his starship. It wasn't safe to come here alone.
interesting. To
That's
learn
a
the
good
witches were
detail
in some kind of
that I didn't think
hibernation
enough
state
about.
when Thrawn arrived and he woke them up.
We don't know that the people in those coffins are dead. They could just be in stasis. They could be just going back to repopulate. They may just need to be woken up. They might not need necromancy. It's an idea I didn't even think about at the time until kind of a little bit later after I saw a couple different comments kind of pointed out as well. And I didn't really think about the context necessarily in the moment, but it might fit.
Assume it wasn't sorcery based because Thrawn's not a sorcerer. It would have just had to been like beep, 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 beep. Hey, wake up. Perhaps the caskets we thought we were seeing are actually a type of cryo chamber that anyone could just be awoken from. And that all of these Dathomiri are just sleeping in suspended animation. Like if Baylan and Shin in episode 6 were right and the witches were fleeing Peridia from that mysterious entity that's calling to Baylan, it would seem based on this episode that that entity was the Mortis gods. So there is some history there that right now
we'll
we
get
can only
there.
guess at, but perhaps there was some conflict between the Night Sisters and the Mortis gods, and that most of the Night Sisters got the hell off the planet, moved to another galaxy onto the planet Dathomir, but some stayed behind in a kind of suspended animation in case those fleeing Night Sisters ever came back to Peridia. Now, of course, they didn't. Morgan was the first one to do that, and Thrawn found them first and woke up their 3 leaders, who then called their last living descendant, Morgan Elsbeth. That could be why they told Morgan, "You heard our dreams," because they were sleeping and astrally projecting to her. So again, it might not be caskets they're transporting, but rather cryopods, suspended in, I guess, maybe a less severe form of carbonite. Ezra says he was afraid to come here alone, and Ahsoka responds,
Well, you're not alone anymore.
this comes back later in the big moment
yeah.
with Sabine.
And you will die here. Alone.
Not alone.
In both cases,
Yeah.
one cannot help but think of Gandalf providing backup at the Battle of Helm's Deep and Two Towers, and our man Carl Urban Amber came in with the line heard from heaven.
Dead and king stand alone. Not alone.
Thrawn commands to bombard them with turbo lasers,
Yes.
and the 3 evade the blast, breaking ankles, reminding me of Kanan dodging Thrawn's bombardment of Chopper Base on Attilan in the Rebel Season 3 finale. So Ahsoka, Ezra, and Sabine combine their force abilities to open the gate of the fortress, and there are more Sith Urkatot letters around the frame of the gate. Actually, Zen Kibbers on Twitter was wonderful to begin translating this for us, finding the word rain, and from there, I tried to translate the rest of it. I think the next 2 words are last for all. So rain, last for all. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is part of the passage that Tommy J. Wall translated a couple weeks back. Raise or praise Kujet, ruler of all, may his reign last for all time. Kujet being the evil ruler of the ancient Zepho race from
Dude, I want more on that.
Is the word praise Kujet, or since we don't actually see the P, is it raise Kujet? Because they are headed to Dathomir, home of Kujet's tomb, and maybe the Night Sisters plan to resurrect the ancient Zepho force-wielding sage of Kujet. The Night Troopers
That would be
fire upon Ahsoka
wild.
and Ezra and Sabine. Sabine actually manages to deflect a few shots with her saber.
Yep.
I feel bad for this guy. One of the Night Troopers totally trips on the steps despite nothing hitting him. You know, actors struggling to move around in Stormtrooper armor and helmets is kind of a long Star Wars tradition, dating.
Hey, he's also been there for a really long time. Knees are probably weak. He hasn't had a lot of time to keep in shape or whatever. Maybe resources dwindling. Maybe he didn't get his rations that morning. I'll substantiate it any way I can.
The guy in the 1977 Star Wars who bumped his head on the door on the Death Star.
Donk.
But sensing that Sabine isn't really feeling her lightsaber, Ahsoka tells her to switch to her blasters, finally drawing out all the night troopers so that, she can just take turns shooting them.
It's kind of a callback to when they were working together in the ship. She had to change her approach to motivate Sabine, so she had to, play to her skills. It's her getting to know her apprentice. She's still not quite as confident with the lightsaber, and they have enough coverage between her and Ezra to deflect the bolts, and they can just return fire. As a nice strategic move, I thought.
Force pushes one, and then he slides down. It looks like he slashes one in the butt. Then Ezra Force pulls the last two into Ahsoka's sabers.
If only they had weapons that could dismember people, because these zombies would be way more useless when they came back.
It sounds like one of those night troopers was female, and Ahsoka definitely seems to be enjoying this kill way too much. Meanwhile, the Great Mother's chant some
I think she was just like, this was a sick pose.
These are the same exact words of the chant of resurrection performed by Old Daka in that Clone Wars Massacre episode. And they're doing the same thing here, resurrecting the night troopers as zombies! And Kevin Kiner samples this particular music. Take a listen. This is Camille Saint-Saëns' 1874 Danse Macabre, a famous musical riff that comes up a lot in What We Do in the Shadows. I love that show, but I remember it from my favorite episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Hush. By the way, this is one of the best gags of the show where Buffy has to pantomime stabbing with a stake to kill the gentleman, but it looks like something else. And I feel like Sam's song here might even be an intentional Buffy reference because Sarah Michelle Gellar, who is the wife of Kanan voice actor Freddie Prinze Jr., and kind of a member of the Star Wars family because she voiced the seventh sister in Rebels. But the historical idea of the Danse Macabre is that death appears at midnight every year on Halloween, calling forth the dead from their graves to dance for him while he plays the fiddle. So that's why the song begins with the solo violin playing the tritone, which was known in the medieval times as the Diabolus in Musica, or the Devil in Music. So it is October, folks. Happy Halloween. Ahsoka is ending with this classic spooky needle drop as witches resurrect zombies. I love it. So green light beams from the Night Sisters' eyes and glows from under the Stormtroopers' helmets. Ahsoka asks Ezra if this has happened before, and he oddly says, no, this is new, which is weird because in that Rebels Season 3 episode, Visions and Voices, Ezra and Sabine do fight some green Night Sister spirits in Maul's abode on Dathomir, spirits that possess Sabine and Kanan, so it is kind of something he's seen before, but I guess he hasn't seen like dead bodies reanimate. But again, my favorite part of all this is how it sounds. That dude. Is so intense. It actually causes the
coming through their comms.
Like even the tech in this helmet doesn't know how to filter this inhuman scream. Ezra gets grabbed on the staircase, and Sabine can't get a clean shot with her blasters to save him, so she has to use her lightsaber, and she gets a clean kill. And then from here, she smoothly deflects 3 more shots. It kind of seems like Ezra being in danger is what brings the Force out of her the most. That actually gives a double meaning to
her
this
connection.
line.
What's your excuse?
I missed you.
He's not just joking, like, I miss this kind of banter, I miss us. He's literally saying the reason I didn't keep up with my training is that I had no one to use the Force for until now. So the Chimera docks with the Eye of Sion, and it does look a lot like the Jedi starfighters with their hyperspace rings in the prequels, but just on a much bigger scale. Thrawn tells Morgan,
we covered that.
Rate, they may get on board the ship, which would be problematic. We require a little more time.
This is such a cool acting choice by Lars Mikkelson. Like, he begins to say something, and then he just decides in the moment to stay silent and let Morgan fill the subtext. That subtext being, I need you to volunteer to stay behind and hold back those Jedi. Thrawn says goodbye with,
for the Empire.
Yet, as he walks off, Morgan whispers,
Pull Dathomir.
Yeah, it sounds like these witches are ultimately not forever loyal to Thrawn and are really just using him to pursue their own goals.
Maybe that's why she came here in the first place, or at least, she does have a loyalty to Thrawn, but this is also something I think she was doing because of those dreams, because of what this means for her people too. So it's kind of a double-edged sword in a couple different ways.
So Thrawn's defeat by many arms surrounding him in a cold embrace may occur on Dathomir someday. Ahsoka and the others run into Morgan, and I like how Ahsoka instinctively puts her hand back to stop Sabine from rushing in. I love the sound that the blade of Talzin makes when it gets ignited.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard a force push, and then kind of a vibration that slows down, and then at the end, these little flute.
Good one.
Yeah, their fight is mostly fun to watch, really just to listen to this dialogue between Kevin Kiner's instruments. It's like all the animals and Peter and the wolf getting in a melee. And I was curious why, if Morgan's whole mission was to stop the Jedi from getting
I brought that up. I was like, she's doing a really bad job, just lets them walk right through.
Just let Ezra and Sabine go right past her, but it's really because Ezra and Sabine run into what look like a couple of really tall, Winklevoss-sized troopers, who have also been zombified, as when Sabine blasts away chunks of this helmet, there's definitely a snarling corpse mouth underneath. Sabine summons a lightsaber with the Force and kills that trooper with a clean hand stab, kind of like Kylo Ren's finishing move against the Praetorian Guard in The Last Jedi. Sabine helps Ezra pay no mind to the gap from that fortress to the departing Chimera, giving him that extra little Force push. It's crazy. We do hear the Force theme. It's really fun. Actually, Kanan, I remember, used a similar move in the Rebels Ghost of Geonosis episode.
Yeah.
That was a much smaller gap. Meanwhile, Morgan's Blade of Talzin severs one of Ahsoka's hilts. Whoa, this is one she's had for a while. It's a big deal to lose it, and we get to see
it's one of the ones Anakin gifted her.
Inosanto, a longtime stunt performer and goddaughter to Bruce Lee. She is so much fun to watch, and I'm gonna miss seeing her in Star Wars.
Same.
As Sabine returns, Morgan is pissed. She screams, "Kill her!" And really, that's just her anger because her master Thrawn left her alone to die. So she feels pissed that Ahsoka's mentor-student relationship wasn't severed the same way hers was. So it rattles Morgan, and that allows us.
I don't know if I wholly feel that way about that. I think that's just like, she's like, we gotta stop her. I don't know if she made that personal. Myself.
Ahsoka to get the upper hand. She goes on the offensive. Sabine, meanwhile, clears those night troopers with
blaster stance.
Blaster together in tandem, fully incorporating Jedi elements with Mandalorian ones. Ahsoka finishes the duel. She drives Morgan's blade into the ground, snatching it from her, and then double swipes her with the lightsaber and the Talzin blade. And listen to the sound emitted when Morgan dies.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a ghostly wail as she falls to her knees and rolls over. This is what the Great Mother sensed to know that Morgan died, like a million Night Sister spirits screaming out in terror, suddenly silenced. Ezra gets to do one of his favorite things from Rebels, using a Stormtrooper comlink to impersonate a Stormtrooper and then disguise himself with Stormtrooper armor. Of course he does this. Thrawn orders to bombard the fortress, and Clotho gives him a look. She doesn't stop him from destroying their ancestral home, but it is
but there was a twinge.
Sisters harboring a different agenda and possibly turning on Thrawn one day. Ahsoka and Sabine escape the night troopers by jumping off the ledge, seemingly to their death, but nope, like Marty McFly on the Flying DeLorean in Back to the Future Part 2, they surf the T6 and escape as the fortress collapses. Thrawn chats with Ahsoka, saying,
I know you, because I knew your master. One wonders just how similar you might become.
Yeah, to me, this is confirmation that Thrawn totally knew that Anakin became Vader. And then he says,
perhaps this is where a Ronin such as you belongs.
Ronin!
Yeah.
Ronin were masterless samurai in feudal Japan. And of course, since the Jedi have their roots in samurai culture, it just makes sense for the term to be used here for Ahsoka. So I guess we need to add Ronin to this shirt. Warrior, outcast, rebel, Jedi, and Ronin. You can get this shirt, by the way, at nerdriot.shop. Like Moff Gideon has said many times before, Thrawn leaves with
long live the Empire.
The Eye of Sion blasts off with the Chimera, and you can see Thrawn is just so satisfied to be leaping off to hyperspace by his own choice for a change.
Yeah.
Ahsoka and Sabine return to the Noti, and Ahsoka sees her bird, Morai. This
finally
is the representation of the Mortis god, the daughter, that continues to accompany Ahsoka throughout her life, like it appeared in the World Between Worlds and Rebels. Vader saw it in the final shot of the Clone Wars series while he was searching for Ahsoka. The bird even showed up on a burnt tree on Corvus in The Mandalorian when we first saw Ahsoka in live action. So seeing Morai here tells Ahsoka that she is where she needs to be. They saved Ezra,
And that bird gets
basically traded
around.
places with him, but I think
Yeah.
there's something more on Peridia for Ahsoka.
Oh, yeah.
So on to the epilogue
For sure.
sequence. Shin Hati joins up with the bandits of Peridia, and then Baylan appears on this massive rock formation, statues of the three gods of Mortis, carved directly into the mountain. We see the father, who's pointing out to the distance, to the right, the son, and to the left, that statue was the daughter, but her head has crumbled away. There's actually a crevasse formed between her shoulder and the father, some distance between the two. So we have talked before about the Mortis.
Hold on. I'm gonna roll it back just a tad because I want to look at something. Yeah, it is enclosed here. I was wondering. I was like, due to the angle, I wasn't sure if you could get away with saying maybe there's a crevice between each of them. But yeah, no, there's definitely one here that is a little more connected. So there's a lot you can glean about this on what it means or entails or can represent, or it's just a statue that eroded. Could just be as simple as that. But the fact the father still stands and the son still stands could raise some suspicions.
Directly into the mountain. We see the father, who's pointing out to the distance, to the right, the son, and to the left, that statue was the daughter, but her head has crumbled away. There's actually a crevasse formed between her shoulder and the father, some distance between the two. So we have talked before about the Mortis gods. They are the three deities, really the holy trinity of Star Wars, celestials who come from another galaxy. Ahsoka, Anakin, and Obi-Wan meet them in Clone Wars Season 3, and they return in mural artwork outside the Lothal Jedi Temple. The daughter gives Ezra access to the world between worlds, and the son's fist later destroys this portal. The father's statue is pointing to a distant mountain where we can see a pillar of light. At first I thought this was a volcano, but no, the light goes off on a specific frequency. It goes on and off.
It's like a beacon.
On and off, meaning it's some kind of artificial beacon. Now the full visual reminds me quite a bit of Mount Doom in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought.
This father statue totally reminds me of the Argonath statues at the gates of Gondor along the river. But when Baylan first looked out from the fortress tower in episode 6, he looked at a mountain range that was covered in fog. And I think that was the other side of this cliffside, or maybe the start of the range that leads to that distant peak. The something stirring that Baylan sensed, we now know was connected to the Mortis gods. Might have been the gods themselves, their essence living on in the realm of Mortis. And this tells us that the Dathomiri, the Zepho, whoever else was here in Peridia must have known these gods, maybe worshipped them, had some relationship with them. I believe might have gotten their power from them, that they stole Force sorcery, like Prometheus stealing fire from the gods, and that they were
I have a wholly other theory at this point.
What the father is pointing to, what Baylan's destination is a portal to Mortis. And why is Baylan so connected to it? Well, notice if you look closely, that blinking light is the same fiery orange-red color as Baylan's saber. And I don't think that's a coincidence. It could be a kind of...
Dave did say that the color choice of the saber would matter and play into something, which clearly that wasn't explored in the show itself. So who knows?
Or heart of Kyber that has crystals this particular color, and it's beckoning all Ronin wanderers looking for the pre-Jedi Order, pre-Sith Order source of all Force abilities. Now, could that pillar of light be a kind of geyser from the wellspring of life? Could it be Bendu farting?
It does have.
I don't know.
It does have the same color. It's not as deep in orange as his saber. Let's be real. It's not. But it is the exact same color tone as the wellspring. I'll get into what I think here in a second if he has a good cutoff point.
I do like how this shot lines up Baylan with the father, because the father represented the balance between the sides of the Force.
That's
So if
all
Baylan is
he
the
was
father,
trying to
who's the
do.
son? Who's the daughter? I think Shin could be the son, someone embracing the dark side, and Ahsoka then would obviously be the daughter linked with Morai, but all three of these characters are still on Peridia. Sadly, we lost Ray Stevenson too soon, but I would love to see this explored in animation, maybe in a Tales of the Jedi episode. We'll see what happens in the future.
Okay. Big thing a lot of people were posing, because obviously he had his theories for quite some time throughout, you know. Obviously, we were talking about what all could be here, whether it be the Mortis gods, whether it be the Bendu, or the priestesses, the Force priestesses. But one thing that we haven't been talking about, and it's nothing that's been addressed in the canon at all yet, and that is the Mother, Abeloth, a Legends figure that came about, you know, during the Clone Wars, post Bordizzo, when the EU started to try to explore that a little bit further on its own. It's a character that was the mother to the parallel to the father in a way. Unbalanced, kind of, where he's the balance, the daughter and the son are opposites, he's the balance, he keeps them intertwined. She also helps preside over them in a different way, but she's very much a darker figure. And now I've seen people mention Abeloth as a possibility of what direction this might be heading, and I never really was leaning that direction. I was pretty, thought that was kind of a little bit of a stretch until this episode. She goes by the moniker of the Mother, and since this is the homeworld of the Dathomiri, their ancient homeworld where they come from before they colonized Dathomir, and a lot of their stuff structures around this mystical magic ichor rather than traditional methods of calling upon the Force. And they also, in their hierarchy, there's Knight Brothers, there's Knight Sisters, but then everyone above that is, you got Mother Talzin, you have the Great Mothers. It's mostly a matriarchal society, which I think the farther you get up to it, and a lot of that might stem from, and maybe why their powers work the way they do, is what if that is a connection to the Mother above mothers? That would kind of attach the Dathomiri to something, where the Mortis gods kind of pull into the Jedi side of things a little more closely. The separation of the Mother, maybe this is her prison, or where she's from, or returned, or buried, or something. I don't know. That's something I had thought of, and that's why maybe the Dathomiri over time realized maybe it's probably not the best to be here or around this area. Maybe we should peace out, or maybe this is part of some darker plan to spread that connection, return it to Dathomir. Maybe that was their reach into the core worlds. There's a lot of different ways you could go with that, but it would be a very bold and very different whole thing for Star Wars to tackle, would be to bring Abeloth into this thing, because whoo boy, that's a kind of a big deal to bring in this malignant deity of sorts. Again, something stirs, a lot of the witch imagery, the toil and trouble, the things calling us out here, and what he's hearing, this power that'll break the cycle, break the balance, if you will, could be Abeloth. The only thing that works against that theory, to me, is I don't think, regardless of any of that there would be statues of the Mortis gods, the primary figures, the Father, the Son, the Mother, with the Father. If this was a prison, at least being like, hey, we put her over there. Anybody looking? If you hear her calling, she's that way. That's the only thing. I don't know if the statue, it would make sense to leave behind a big old over there if it is something they're trying to bury or suppress or keep hidden. That's the only thing I feel like works against it in my head. But that would be wild. But could be something else. Could be more akin to what he said.
The Eye of Sion and the Chimera approach Dathomir. Waiting for them there again are Night Sister ruins and Kujit's tomb. And we see the full bulk of containers, and counting as many of these piles as we could. 3 by 5 by 4, that would be 60 per pile. Some piles are different sizes, but the grand total would be around 5,565 containers. And
yeah.
These might not be corpses. They might just be a race of Night Brothers and Night Sisters that have been in cryogenic stasis that these witches want to use to repopulate Dathomiri society. Ezra pilots Baylan Skoll's old Eta-class shuttle that was in the array of the Chimera to the New Republic fleet, escorted by 2 A-Wings. Actually, the opening scene of the series was this ship landing on a New Republic cruiser.
Oh, yeah, that is a good point.
And Chopper is the first to recognize him. Ezra and
I knew it paralleled that scene, but I didn't think about the bookend nature of it.
Take each other in. It's so emotional. The ghost is behind them. We hear a synthy rendition of the Rebels theme song, but no Zeb appearance. Oh,
yeah.
Come on. Really? We end back at the Noti camp, and Sabine sees Ahsoka looking out at the illuminated rings of the planet. Sabine, though, senses something, but then she shrugs it off as
nothing. Just shadows in the starlight.
This might be a nod to the new Star Wars book, Star Wars The High Republic Shadows of Starlight, that is now available today.
Interesting.
And there's actually a little clue in the music if you listen closely here.
What is it?
Oh my God, Kevin Kiner included a subtle leitmotif to Across the Stars.
Yeah.
Padme's love theme from Attack of the Clones. After Duel of the Fates, it is my favorite John Williams composition
love
from the
it.
prequels. Across the Stars. What a perfect song title to end this Ahsoka series on, because no other Star Wars title has taken us across the stars quite like Ahsoka has.
Yeah.
Ahsoka gives a little nod to the Force ghost of Anakin, our shadow in the starlight, smiling at his snips for making peace with the student that she feared would make the same mistakes her master did. Ahsoka has now learned to pass on what you have learned. Strength, mastery,
weakness, folly, failure also. Yes, failure most of all. We are what they grow beyond. That is the true burden of all masters.
Thank you so much for making time out of your week for us these past 2 months. There are a lot of great analysis sources out there that you can find great Star Wars content from. Screen Crush, Heavy Spoilers, Star Wars Explained, The Den of Nerds.
I watch them all,
Awesome,
man.
the folks of the Ringer Network, and I hope that we at New Rockstars have been able to bring something to the table to enrich this experience for you. Please subscribe to all 3 channels of the New Rockstars Network, including the Break Room, where we do our Ahsoka After Shows Wookiee Leaks. Thanks to Noah Chen for helping me write and research this breakdown. You can follow me at EA Voss, follow New Rockstars. Thanks for watching, and I know.
No. Oh. All right, guys. That was a great breakdown. And at this point, I don't really have too much to add. I really like the finale. Any of the qualms I have with it is just meta-contextual knowledge that I have from the outside world that really shouldn't be held against the show or anything like that. My wants and needs and desires for the story that we haven't got yet and that we may not get now. I don't know. I do hope that at least we explore this in animation, whether it be Tales of the Jedi, some kind of animated form, or if they recast and move forward and we explore with somebody who can kind of carry that character in honor of Ray Stevenson forward to make that sure that that carries that same screen presence, and just like there's just so much about that I hope we get to explore, and that's my real only hang-ups with it. You know, there's a couple little hiccups in some of the scenes as far as like the actors in the background, the intensity of certain moments, the quickness of certain events. But overall, I still really freaking enjoyed that episode. I loved the season as a whole. I really thought they nailed this thing from beginning to end, and we got some really good moments throughout, man. Episode 5, goddamn, still great. But yeah, man, I don't know what else to say at this point, so I'm going to pass it off to you guys. Were there any Easter eggs that you guys caught that they missed here? Any theories that you guys have that we did not express, whether it be from their video or something that I proposed? I would love to hear from all you guys. So sound out the comments. Let me know your thoughts down below. We'll carry on the conversation after the video. I hope you enjoyed this reaction. If you did, leave a like, drop a comment, subscribe if you're not already. Make sure to subscribe to New Rockstars if you haven't already. I have a link to their video in the description below. And before we go, I want to shout out our channel legends: Manny Sher, Ryan Karen, Yorick Coruscant, Margaret Grace Melito, Robert Anguiano, Jeffrey Hale, Jake Intrell, Eric Official, Amy Becca, and Casey Wood. Thank you guys so much for your continued support. But that's it for this video, guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Until then, may the Force be with you always. Take care, everybody.